Beep, boop. Recently, I went back home to Worcester, UK, and I had the opportunity to speak in my old primary school about archaeology and about the process of writing my book, Tales of Ancient Worlds, Adventures in Archaeology. Super proud of it. Great Christmas gift for anyone who has children or knows children between the ages of 7 and 11, or even your grandma and granddad too, get it for them as well. Without a doubt, it's been the greatest honor so far of having this YouTube channel and writing this book. It's going back to my old school and chatting to the kids about it. And I actually met one of the students who had bought and read my book, a chap called Bertie. Haven't got his picture, I'll put a suitable substitute up here. And he wrote me some really fantastic questions, even if you know a lot about archaeology. These are great questions, and I'm gonna answer them here today. Bertie, I'm sorry I'd already come back to America when you dropped off the letter. I'm sorry about that. But my mum sent me a photo, so shout out to mum there. All right, let's get into this. Question number 1, how do we know humans reached Monte Verde? This is in regards to the pages on the earliest people in the Americas. That's a great question, Bertie. That's really a great question. When people arrived in America, it's truly one of the most challenging questions in archaeology. It's so difficult to know when that happened. What's so special about Monte Verde is that way back in history, there was a stream there, and it seems like it got blocked and created like a bog over the archaeological site at some point since the people had lived there. And what's so great about bogs is that they preserve things that normally just decompose and wash away, like plants and wood and things like that. So in Monte Verde, they have not only stone tools, which are very good at surviving archaeologically, but hearths, plants, animal bones, so many different things. Animals from the sea, animals and plants from the Andes. It really shows the huge sort of ability that this culture and these people had at gathering resources and living way down in the south of Chile there. And of course, importantly, dated to 14,500 years ago for sure, maybe 18,500 years ago, maybe even 33,000 years ago. If the dating on one of the pieces of charcoal little bit away from the site is to be believed. It's really a special site, and just because of the preservation there allows us to radiocarbon date all this fantastic stuff. Who knows what we'll end up discovering from sites like Monte Verde. Question number 2, which discoveries of Howard Carter do you think is more important, Hatshepsut or Tutankhamun? I'm going to go with Tutankhamun though. I'm not saying that Hatshepsut is not an important discovery, definitely was, but finding an intact tomb of a pharaoh is truly incredible. Archaeology had basically given up at the prospect, really, of finding something like that, because they had all been robbed throughout history, and now we know why, because they're full of so many incredible things. Again, we have so much to learn still from the discovery of Tutankhamun. You would think that we had studied everything, but there's still hundreds upon hundreds of artifacts that haven't been studied. So even if you're a young man like yourself, Bertie, you can still teach us so much more about one of the most famous people in all of history. But I think what's so cool about Tutankhamun is that we have to remember he was a young king and he died before he was 20, and yet his tomb was full of these incredible treasures. And you just can't help but think, what was the tomb of a great pharaoh like Ramses II or something like that? Yeah, the mind boggles at the treasures that must have been in there. Sadly, lost to history now. Did the Indus people trade lapis lazuli with the Egyptians? This is definitely coming from our spread in the book on the Indus Valley civilization. Really interesting time and place. I bet they did trade lapis lazuli with Egypt, yeah. Egyptians certainly used it in their art. In fact, on the mask of Tutankhamun, whilst we're speaking about him, the blue line around the eyes and his eyebrows are made out of lapis lazuli. And I think for sure there were merchants from the Indus Valley involved in getting them to Egypt. Did they have direct contact with Egypt? That's so hard to say. That's so hard to say. I don't know the answer to that. For the most part, I would think no. I would think this is going traded into Mesopotamia and then from Mesopotamia into Egypt. But considering that goods were moving that way, I'm sure the odd person did too. Speaking of the movement of people, question number 4. Did people in the Bronze Age often walk long distances like the Amesbury Archer? This is connected to the spread on Stonehenge and the Amesbury Archer there. Amesbury Archer, buried around near Stonehenge, but probably born in what is now Switzerland, northern Italy, the Alps, that sort of region. This is such a great question, Bertie. This is a really difficult question. How much people moved during the Bronze Age is, again, one of the biggest questions in archaeology. It's so difficult to know. This Bronze Age really was a huge time of migration, I would say. There is one pretty well-supported idea that a lot of the cultures of this Bronze Age originated around what is now Ukraine and southern Russia with this culture archaeologists call the Yamnaya, and then they spread out east and west, taking their way of life with them. Certainly, the Amesbury Archer belonged to this beaker culture, so called because they buried these nice ceramic cups with them, not little coffee cups like this, way bigger. And that beaker culture arrived in Britain from Europe, so the Amesbury Archer was definitely not alone in making that journey. But then again, did some people in the local region adopt these new cultural ways? It's so hard to answer these questions. When a new culture arrives on the scene, is it brought there by new people, or did the local people adopt it themselves through just contact and being good neighbors, things like that? Hard to say for sure, but definitely the Bronze Age was a period of huge migration across Europe. The Amesbury Archer was not alone in moving that distance across the continent. Thank you so much for those questions, Bertie. Once again, I'm sorry I wasn't there in person to get your letter. If any of you want to check out my book, Tales of Ancient Worlds, Adventures in Archaeology, it's an absolute banger. It goes from the earliest evolution of our species to the Middle Ages, basically. We talk about all sorts of stuff: art, war, economies, trade, poo. I think the next time I write a book, I might write it only about poo. You can learn so much from it. But it's a great book. I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of the illustrations. Shout out to Sam Caldwell. He just did an incredible job. And it would make a really great Christmas present for any young kids aged roughly 7 to 11. Check it out. Links in the description. Bertie, you have the makings of a great archaeologist.